Really not a good time if you have a fear of clowns and spiders. Here's your look at the Asmus Toys QBitz It Chapter 2 Pennywise Spider Version 2. Adapted from Stephen King's classic 1986 book, the 2019 film It Chapter 2 introduces Pennywise in his second spider form. Now horror fans can collect this terrifying entity as a 6.69-inch QBitz figure. The Pennywise spider figure features rotating hairpiece and 25 movable joints. Jeepers creepers, when did this clown lose his peepers? Before we get a closer look, though, at the QBitz It Chapter 2 Pennywise Spider Form Version 2, let me go ahead first and thank the folks over at Asmus Toys that did provide the sample that we're about to have a look at for those interested and would like to get their hands or all spider legs around the It Chapter 2 Version 2 or the earlier looked at Version 1. I'll provide the links down below that will take you on over to Asmus Toys website. In the meantime, though, I'm going to grab my tape measure, and based on what I've got configured right now, because of course he does have articulation points on each of his individual legs, we're going to measure him based on this alone. Measuring right to the very top of his head, Pennywise in this state stands a little over 6 inches in height, or the figure is going to be about 16.5 centimeters tall. To show you the differences between the two Pennywises, here's the version 2 that we're about to have a look at. I'm going to bring then in the version 1. I've also slightly changed the configuration for the legs, and that may be something I'm going to talk a lot about in this review. Simply just put, because there's so much articulation that they've added to each of the individual arms or spider legs, you can have these in different configurations. Now, what I've got right now, the one in the version 2, I sort of have like the legs more folded in with one another, or you can again have the legs more extended out. It's entirely up to you how you want to do this. But what you will, though, see, despite having different heads and different configurations, they are sharing, though, the exact same bodies. Picking up the version 2, getting a closer look at this right now, something a little off-putting. I mean, obviously, there's a lot off-putting by the fact it's Pennywise the clown, but there's something even more off-putting by the fact he doesn't have any eyes whatsoever. He only has just a mouth and just a nose and just a mouth, and what a mouth he does certainly have. Now, just overlooking the fact he does have a big hole in the back. Hello, how are you? He does have quite a lot of rows of teeth. They actually look like tiny little tombstones, both on the top and both on the bottom. They're not hard plastic. Well, I guess they're fairly hard plastic, but it doesn't have any articulation at all. But there is a hole, though, on the back. And just to those spin this around, you can see here on the back, it sort of looks like a very sinister looking flower. Don't put your nose near it, whatever you do. I'm just going to actually move this other Pennywise out of the way here for a second. There is a hole technically here on the back that if you had yourself, for example, a light source, so happen to have myself my black light here, you could run a real light source then in the back of it, and it would illuminate the front of his face, similar to what he does in the movie. This is only fixed by the fact of actually having yourself a flashlight or a torch, as some people would also like to call that, and that's one way to actually illuminate. You can see right there the way to illuminate the inside of his mouth. If not for that, you probably could have this in front of, for example, like a lamp somewhere on your desk, maybe not so close to your bed. I don't think you'd want to be falling asleep with your eyes closing shut and having this thing looking at you, but it's got a lot of cool detailing going for it. Not having, of course, then the eyes, it does have, though, a much more stretched out mouth. And then it does have, like the one that we looked at before, fiery looking hair. In fact, actually, we can bring in the earlier looked at version 1 Pennywise, so you can see there's a lot of good differences happening between the two figures. I couldn't help but also notice not only not missing the features on the face, but also this one seems to have what I can see is slightly brighter hair. It looks like it's a little bit more fiery. It also seems to stick out a lot more than the version 1 we looked at earlier. The collars, you can see, if I can just pick them up, look exactly to be the same. The bodies are also seeming to be sharing the same molds, and even though the legs are all sort of intertwined with one another, there's a lot of cool articulation points that we're going to be talking about more in a moment. We've already, again, had a look at the version 1. If you want to have a more extensive look at version 1, check out my review of that. But we're going to move this one out of the way and bring back in the version 2, because, again, I really like the look of this one quite a lot. The head, unfortunately, though, does have limited articulation, but that was the same when we looked at the version 1 also as well. I'm guessing there seems to be a ball joint, though it's a little harder to see at least, but it doesn't really give you much in the way of posability. When it comes to rotating the head, all you can really do is rotate it by, well, about that much and that much. You can move it up and down only just by a little bit, but there's very little in the way of clearance, and that's okay. I mean, more of the articulation is all sort of kind of kept around the body area anyways, and again, there's a lot of articulation here. So he doesn't have anything here in the waist. The body seems to just be one straight mold. But if we spin the spider upside down, Each of the individual legs, if I can just fan them out here so you guys can actually see everything that's going on here, each of the legs actually do have a joint on the shoulder area, or what would be the closest thing to a shoulder, has it also in the elbow area, and it has it also here in the claws. Now with those, each of them also individually rotate back and forth. So not only can you hinge them inward or outward, depending on how you prefer to have this displayed, but you also can rotate this at the shoulder, you can rotate this at the forearm, and you can also rotate the individual claws. The claws do vary in size. You can see that they are slightly smaller as they get closer to the back of his body. A little bit longer, I really should say, on the end one, but the ones in the middle are a little more on the smaller side. And then you got these big long ones. These are the ones you're going to be the most careful of. Really nice looking paint though. You can see that they start with, I'm guessing, gray paint, and then they've airbrushed a lighter color in there as well. The version 1 that we looked at also has the exact same paint scheme, so nothing does necessarily change there. They probably could have added something also in this to differentiate this from the version 1 that we looked at before, maybe like splattering on some little glowing areas or something along those lines, but I think it's fine, really fine the way it is. For the articulation on this one, we already looked at the fact that the head is going to be a little bit more on the limited side, but the arms, again, you can rotate these back and forth. The hardest thing, if anything, is when you're rotating, you're going to notice like the legs are sort of going to hit one another. So you just want to make sure there's enough clearance. You can move the legs, each of them individually, back and forth this way. You can hinge them out also back and forth this way. And then you've got a hinge joint here in the elbow. You've got a hinge joint here in the claw. And then again, you're literally going to rinse and repeat that with every single one of the individual legs. Between those then collectively, you can decide for yourself how you want this displayed. If you want the head a little bit more higher up, then it's probably best advised just to kind of bring these legs inward and sort of just then have it propped more up where you can then see a full face, kind of like what we've got going on right here. If you, though, did want to have it in a more crouched position, then again, you just simply bring these legs down. Well, again, I don't have to necessarily tell you guys how you're going to want to have these displayed. You can then choose for yourself exactly how you want to have these displayed, but what fun-looking figures these certainly are. If you are a fan of the It Chapter 1 or even Chapter 2, I mean, not that it necessarily has to be specifically to Chapter 2. I mean, again, neat-looking designed Pennywise. I believe also Asmus Toys did also release a standalone Pennywise on only 2 legs. So if you prefer your scary clowns to have maybe less limbs, there's also that option also available as well. Price point for both of these, as we already talked about in the version 1 review, but the version 2 also goes for around that same price, I think around $39.99. I'll provide certainly links down below. Again, if you guys are interested, I think as of right now, Asmus Toys does have it in stock over on their website. Despite having such a cool looking form in the movie, really when you think about it, there's been very few companies, very few, that have actually produced a collectible or figure of Spider Pennywise. Come along, of course, is the folks over at Asmus Toys that have not only given us one for our collection space with the version 1 that we looked at before, but now landing at version 2. The bodies are exactly going to be the same and sharing all the same levels of articulation that the original version 1 had is also here for the version 2. So the bodies are going to be exactly the same. Nothing different between the two. What is, though, different is the creepy head that they've now sculpted on the version 2, going away from eyes, because we don't need to have eyes necessarily on this version of Pennywise, but instead swapping it out for a big row of big giant chompers, top and bottom, and a big hole on the back of his noggin that if you have yourself like a little flashlight or even a tiny little tea light that you probably could even attach on the back of his head, you can have the inside of his mouth illuminating, kind of like they did in the movie. I think that's a really fun touch, the fact that they would have included that. It's not certainly something for a stylized looking Pennywise that Asmus even had to incorporate into version 2, and yet they did, and I love them more for it. Again, if you guys are interested to get this one or the earlier looked at version 1 Pennywise in spider form, the QBitz version of them are available for $39. I think they're about $39.99. And I think, again, for getting a stylized version of Pennywise with as much articulation when you think about it, times 8 on this figure's body, I think $39.99 is a great price to get for this guy. Again, I'll provide the links down below if you guys are interested to get version 1, if you guys are interested to get version 2, and hey, why not? If you're interested to get both of them, I'll provide the links down below in the video description. In the meantime, I'd like to thank the folks over at Asmus Toys that did come through and provide the sample of the new QBitz It Chapter 2 Pennywise in spider form, version 2. A big thank you for them for providing the samples. If you guys enjoyed this video, why not throw it a like? If you guys are loving the content, you guys are certainly seeing and want to see maybe more from Asmus Toys, might I also suggest not only that you hit that subscribe button down below, that you're also turning on the bell notification, but also at the very end of this video, if I can just shamelessly plug a playlist, popping up at the very end will be a playlist of other things that I've looked at for Asmus Toys over the years, majority being mostly like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, but there is some other things on there as well. I would definitely say if you get a little bit of chance and you have a little bit of time on your hands, check out that playlist that's popping up at the very end of this video. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.